So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this CAD part that was imported from Fusion 360. It's a rocket boat tail. We are going to retopologize it in Blender and get it all render ready. I'm going to walk you through how I would go about remodeling something like this in Blender. So if you see here, if we go into edit mode, you can see it's all triangles. You've got all of this stuff going on. All this topology is just all over the place. So, and on top of that, it's a very complicated model. You've got kind of these like rivets in here, or not rivets, sorry. Chamfers. That bit. We've got these parts in here. So this is meant to be, I believe, 3D printed. So what we're going to do is we're going to remodel this in Blender. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way and just guide you through my thought process. It's going to be quite similar to the last video, which was the one on the extrusion profile. So if you like this video, go check that one out as well. It's quite useful. I give quite a lot of good tips in there. So we've got the CAD file just directly imported, and because it's directly imported from CAD, all the dimensions are all correct. It's all kind of essentially dimension perfect. So what we're going to do, the goal of this is to remodel it in Blender and essentially make it slightly imperfect. So we're going to have some like slight rounding on the edges. We're going to have obviously better topology so we can use all our modifiers and all our nice materials on it. And I'm just going to show you how I would go about solving this kind of problem in Blender. Right, so the first thing we're going to notice is it has sort of 8-fold rotational symmetry here. So each sort of little section like this is symmetrical about the z-axis here. So what I'm going to do is a little trick. We're going to come to the top here, we're going to add an empty, and we're just going to say like a single arrow. Or actually no, we're just going to add plain axes for now, and we'll just make this like 20 millimeters maybe, just so that it's kind of out of the way. Right. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to name this like rot 45. And you might be starting to guess what I'm going to do with this. We're going to rotate it along the z-axis by 45 degrees. And the reason we're doing that is going to become clear in a second. We'll just leave it there for now. So we're going to create a circle. Don't really need to worry about the radius at the moment. We can scale that down just to kind of about there-ish. So I'm just having a look at this. What we want to think about is how many vertices we want in the circle. So it's going to be some multiple of 8, obviously, because the minimum we can have is 8, because that means we've got 1 vertex per each bit here. But we don't really want that. That's a bit low. So what I'm kind of going to go for is I'm going to try and have a vertex about there. So I'm thinking maybe 64 could be good. Yeah, that's probably quite good. And then we can kind of readjust this in a bit. So now that we've got that, we are going to select just this section here. We're going to Control I, get rid of everything else. So now we have essentially just 1/8 of it. And what we're going to do here, we're going to add our first modifier. We're going to add an array modifier. We're going to turn off relative offset. We're going to come into object offset, and we're going to get our little rotation helper thing. And you can see because this is on the origin, you have to make sure that the origin of this and the origin of this are on the same spot, or else it starts to kind of go all over the place and do weird things. Because they're on the same spot, essentially the only transformation that gets applied to each new version of the array, or each kind of new copy of the object, is a 45-degree rotation around the z-axis. So say if I made this like 90 degrees, it would rotate each new copy by 90 degrees. So because we've got 8 of these, we can just set this from 2 up to 8. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit merge, just to make sure it connects them all into the one circle. But it's kind of hard to see because we're in vertex mode, because we are working on quite a small scale. Like this whole thing's only about 80, 90 odd millimeters across. And this is currently set to, what's it, 10 millimeters? Yeah. It's merging them to, like, it's merging first and last copies as well. We'll turn that on. It's kind of, you see here, it's kind of merging all of these vertices because they are within 10 millimeters of each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this to like 0.1 millimeters. So pretty much the only vertices that are going to get merged are kind of ones that are almost exactly on top of each other, or are exactly on top of one another. And make sure first and last copies is on as well. And that means as it goes all the way around, the vertices that are on the same spot merge, and first and last copies make sure it does the same thing to this one here. Cool. So now we're going to have to be careful to use the 3D cursor as the pivot point and make sure the 3D cursor is in the middle, because if we go to scale this here, it'll just scale it based on kind of the average position of these vertices here. But we want to scale it based on the middle of the object, which is this axis here. So we're going to scale this down. And then, first thing we're going to do, we are going to extrude this down. We're going to constrain it to the z-axis there. Now, you can see here, we are essentially going to sort of guess for now the actual distance of this. But what we can do here, you can just kind of play about with it until we get it. Usually you can get it pretty much exactly on. And that's what I would do for most things, just because it's quite quick. But as you can see, it is slightly off here. It's still a little bit off, and I don't want to screw about with that anymore. So what I'm going to do, we're going to go into this. We are going to select one of the vertices on the bottom here. Snap vertices, cursor to selected, and then we are going to select our original part here, and select the bottom. Make sure it's the pivot point 3D cursor, SZ0. And you see it's scaled perfectly onto that, just like that. So now we're going to reset the 3D cursor's position. There we go. And to try and get the closest radius, you can see it's actually, I'll turn on random colours here so you can see which one's which. So our retopologized model is the blue one. And if we scale this like S shift Z, scale it, constrain it to the z-axis, you can see when it's too small you can see more blue, and then when it gets too big you can't see any, you can only see the red. So we want it to be about half and half at the moment, and that's probably good. We're also going to add our next modifier here, just where we can. We're going to add subdivision surface. Set to 2, and now we can kind of rescale it a bit. Just like that. There we go. So that means basically when we get rid of this, very smooth circle, and it is essentially the same dimensions as the original CAD part. So, next part, we are going to extrude this. Just when I extrude it, it doesn't look like it does anything. I just do E and then immediately right click, and that extrudes it, but it doesn't change the position of anything. So then F Shift Z to scale it out here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hide the subdivision surface modifier just so I can get this kind of position right. Just a bit there, just for now. We're going to go ahead and add our next modifier, which will be a bevel modifier. And we are actually going to pull this in front of the subdivision. So it goes in descending order, so it does the array first, merges all the extra vertices at the ends, then adds the bevel, and then subdivides everything. So we're going to set this is essentially going to be our kind of rounding tolerance, this amount here. So we're going to make that for now about half a millimeter. We're going to set the segments to 2, limit method to weight, profile the shape to 0.7 or thereabouts, and meter outer to arc. Now you don't really need to worry about why all these do. This is essentially for weird corners. It's how it handles certain types of corners it meets, and the profile just kind of is the profile of the actual. Actually, I will increase this a little bit so I can show you this a bit better. If I shade flat, where have you gone? Yep, right. Actually, that's why. So we want to Alt select and then Shift Alt select these edges here that we want to make. We want to give the kind of rounding effect to this one as well. We are going to right click, edge bevel weight, set it to 1, and then left click. And there we go. So I'm going to actually take this back down. It's about, there we go. So the profile changes kind of the angle, or how sharp this little section is here. So if you put it up to 1, it's only adds extra geometry. It doesn't actually curve it or anything like that. And then if you put to 0.5, it's kind of circular. And then to about 0.2, you can kind of invert it like that. So about 0.7 is what we want for this. And the reason we're doing that is because if we don't have bevel and we subdivide, it tries to smooth everything out like this. So if we add the bevel modifier, it gives extra geometry here to the subdivision surface to essentially make it think this is more sharp. Essentially, it keeps all the edges sharp, really. You can also use Shift E and get the edge crease, but that kind of creates this like absolutely perfect edge, which can be a bit crap in my opinion. So now that we've got all our modifiers set up, it's just a process of trying to match the shape of the actual object here. So we're going to extrude this, just up along the axis for now. We are going to, there we go. I'm going to do the 3D cursor trick. We are going to cursor to selected, pivot point to 3D cursor, or SZ0, just to get it on the right axis, and then set the cursor back to the world origin. We're going to, now that the cursor's down here, we can, if we scale it along the cursor, it'll just go up as well, so we have to make sure it's constrained, so S-Shift-Z. Then we are going to essentially try and line these up. Doesn't have to be perfect at the moment, but you can sort of see what I'm saying about the kind of half and half. Sort of see it there for now, but... And then you can hold Shift to make it a smaller change without doing that. There we go, that's good for now. Then what we're going to do, we're going to, actually I hate this one as well. We're going to add a edge loop here, or an edge slide. We are going to slide it all the way up, and then we're going to move it down on the Z-axis here. And we're going to add some bevel weight on this edge as well. We're trying to create this here. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the same trick as before. Flip the cursor to here. And then S-Z0. Get along there. And now we can get a more, actually if I snap the cursor back to the world origin, I can get a more precise kind of angle on what this should be here. So if we're trying to go for about half and half on both. Now you can see, because the geometry that was exported from Fusion is a bit weird compared to our Blender model, that's why you start to get the kind of weird Z-fighting here, where they're not really sure which face to display on top. And if you zoom out, it starts to get really bad, because it's just fighting, it doesn't know, because essentially of floating point precision errors, as you zoom out, you start to get all of this fighting here, because it doesn't know the two faces. It thinks are on the exact same position, so it doesn't know which one to display. One of the ways you can fix that is you can come here and push these two closer together, the clip start and the clip end. Generally, so basically when you get outside of 10 meters in this case, it'll clip everything. But say you set this to 1, you get a bit less Z-fighting, essentially. But generally you want to set that to kind of the extent of your workspace. So we're not going to need to go any further than 10 meters really, because like there's no point. Even 5 meters would be alright. And then you get a bit less Z-fighting. Cool. So far we have this sort of profile. We've got the exterior profile. We are going to, essentially we're going to model everything and then we're going to cut these bits in. So we are going to model the exterior first. So we're just going to do the same sort of process. I'm going to be a bit quicker about this, and then we can get the exact parameters later. GZ, bring that down there. GZ, bring that out. It's a bit there, and then what you can do, because these are on the same mesh now, you can, once you've selected this, make sure you're in vertex select mode, shift select something that you want to bring it onto the same level as. Instead of the 3D cursor, you can set the pivot point to active element, so it'll be essentially the last thing selected. So you see how these are all orange and this one's white, or kind of, and the lines are kind of lighter yellowy orange. That means that's the active element. So you can then S-Z0, and that's used as the pivot point. And then you can just hook up these. Like that, and just hold F. Oh, whoa. Okay, not that far. Yeah, so then press F there. Cool. So now we have a kind of fully enclosed shape. We have this sort of the base shape here. And what we can do, we can start to find what the actual shape or the kind of precise-ish like positions for these sort of faces. So S-Shift-Z, scale that out to about, again, it's quite hard to do because the bevel and subdivision make everything slightly imperfect, which is what we're going for. And you might be thinking, oh, well, it's a CAD model, why am I making it imperfect? It's the whole point of it is photorealism, and things in real life, even if they are machined to like an insanely high tolerance, they have these slight imperfections, and it's such a subtle effect, but your eyes notice them. So that's what we're trying to do here, and it'll just make any presentations or anything you're making, if you're making kind of professional renders for anything, especially if you've got like a startup or whatever, and you don't have, say, the money to hire some sort of professional media team or whatever. If you figure out how to do this kind of thing yourself, it's actually really powerful. So we're just going to bring this, I'm not going to screw about with that, I'm just going to bring this to the midpoint there, and that's looking good. And I'm going to bring this whole face set up a little bit further up actually. Even though this was set as the kind of precise one, I want to have it there. And then we can adjust these faces here. So H-Z, a bit there. And once you kind of contrast the two, it looks quite weird, but oh, if you pull that, it's a bit weird. Actually, one of the things you can do to sort that out, just while remembering, if you select this, and then shift select this, Control P and parent it. Now this section, the little helper thing here, you can move it on its own, but when you move the master object, it follows it around, so the origins are always on the top, or always on top of each other. They're always on the exact same point, unless you move this on its own, which, that's funky, isn't it? Anyway, right, so now we have this sort of main shape here, right? Now what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and cut in these little bits here, and this is why we set the number of vertices as high as we did before. So we're going to select a little blue one here, and it can be quite hard to see, so actually in the vertex mode, so actually what I'm going to do, wireframe color, we're going to set it to random. That is god awful atrocious. Never mind, we're going to set it back. The thinking here is I'm trying to kind of see which the difference between the two objects, but they're both really bloody bright. So anyway, what we can do now is pull this into, make a new edge loop here, and this is the importance of having good topology, so you can make all these edge loops while you're modeling things. Again, I've got a good topology case study as my last video, so if you haven't watched that, I'd recommend that. So what we're going to do, we're going to pull this to here, so that we can start making these cuts in here, right? And you can see that is essentially on the line of where that connects there. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take all these faces in the middle, and we're going to get rid of them, right? And you can see we're already starting to get the sort of the base shape. It's not perfect yet. And again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but we're going to get it a bit closer. So what we are going to do now is we are going to take this section here, just the kind of the top edge there. We're going to extrude it, make sure it's on the 3D cursor there, and just extend it out. And now the modifiers will start to freak out, so you might get some weird geometry like all that, faces and stuff and things. But we will fix that when it comes to it. I'm actually going to turn off the modifiers for now, just so we can see what we're doing a bit better. Set this to shade flat. There we go. So yeah, if you're ever struggling to look at what your models are actually doing, just turn off the modifiers for a second. Right, so what I'm actually going to do right now is we're going to adjust the positions of these, so you can see in the model it looks like these are actually straight instead of instead of following this kind of the radius of the shape, instead of following the direct kind of, I guess, circumference, or not circumference, sorry. They go straight relative to each other instead of relative to the actual radius of the circle. They're parallel to this line in the middle here. So what we're gonna do is let me try to think through this. Yeah, right. So we're gonna try and move these across, essentially. We're doing a bit of edge sliding. And because we want to try and confine all of the changes we're going to make to this area, we're going to make them as local as possible. We are going to add an edge cut down here, just so that all this geometry up here isn't affected. And if we have any weird artifacts, they're kind of confined to down here, and we can fix them locally. So what we're going to do, we are going to scale this out to about there. And then we can start to scale it back in relative to the 3D cursor, so we can scale it back to there. Just like that. And then what we can do, I'm actually going to do a little trick here. We are going to set the active element. We are going to, so that we're scaling relative to this. Or actually, no, what we're going to do, we're going to set the active element to this one. So we're scaling relative to this. We're going to do SX0. And then we're going to actually do the same on this one. So we're going to do, so select this, shift select this, SX0, so it's now there. And we might be thinking, right, we've done it on this side, now how do we do it on that side? Because the axes aren't lined up, we can't do it to the x-axis. So what we're going to do is we're just going to rotate the whole thing by 45 degrees. Just like that. 5. And then we're going to do the same thing. So now the x-axis is lined up. So we can use it, we can just go this, active element, SX0, and then same thing here. And then we can rotate it back if we want. We could even just keep it there, but I'm going to rotate it back just so that it's in the same place as it was before. So it's now minus 45. Cool. So, what do we need to do now? We have this set up. We're actually going to scale this out ever so slightly, I think. So just like that, do this. Yes, just that. Just pull it out a bit there. Right. So now, if we take a look at this geometry here, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to try and select these if I can. So just select them by sharp, if that's possible. Yep. So we've got this kind of cutout that goes down here, and it starts to get a bit finicky down here. And we don't really need to worry too much about that, but we're going to try and replicate it as close as possible. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to our original, our kind of remade object. I think we're going to start off by, well, first of all, we're going to add some bevel weights on these edges just to keep them sharp. I'm sorry. Bevel weight 1. There we go. It's quite hard to kind of see. This is, it can be quite hard to see in here what you're actually doing. So we're going to select these edges as well to keep them sharp too. And we are going to select this whole, this loop rather, all the way around here. So we've got this whole loop selected, kind of this bottom one here, and we're just going to extrude this down for now, just to keep everything sort of organised. Hide that there. So the corners we want to keep sharp are this one and this one. Select it there. So we're going to add some bevel weight to them. And for now, we're going to add some bevel weight to these, right? We're going to come and redo that in a minute. Or not in a minute, but once we've done this sort of bottom section here. But for now, we're just going to keep them sharp just to make our lives easier. So it may look a bit off, but don't worry, we will get to that. So we're going to quickly preview our modifiers here. We're going to get them back on. And you can see we're really starting to get there with the shape. And this is, I'll show you this, we'll turn off the division just to show you this. This is why we selected this arc as the geometry option here. If we set it back to sharp, it starts to change the way it handles corners. So arc is generally what you want because it keeps the surface flatter. So if I turn on the subdivision, set this back to sharp, you get this really stretched out edges, which we really don't want. So we want to just set this to arc, and it'll kind of keep the geometry more square here. It handles these corners a lot better. Right, so let's get back to this. What I want to do is I'm going to go back to the bottom here. Yep, inside here. Again, it can be quite hard to see, but just where it hit the bottom there, we're going to set the 3D cursor down here. Cursor to selected. And then we're going to take our edge loop here at the bottom. And because this is just one loop now, we can select it all and then just Alt left click and to select the whole thing. We scale it down, as said, 0, like that. And now everything looks a bit weird because it's poking out of its own geometry. So one of I'm going to use this to illustrate a point quickly. If you don't have backface culling on, it can be very hard to tell which way everything should be. Because basically backface culling hides faces where the normals are facing away from you. So it shows you what faces should be kind of outside. So I'm actually just going to take a drink quickly because my god, I've been speaking for God knows how long. How long have we been recording for? 26 minutes straight. Wow. Man's got to hydrate. So, also, yeah, stay hydrated while you're doing Blender. Important. Anyway, right, back to this. So, backface culling. We're going to turn that back on. What we are going to do really quickly is I'm actually just going to see these little vertices here. And I'm going to pull these in. It can be quite hard to see, but I'm going to pull these inside here. Not to the point where they merge like that, but just for here for now. And that means I can scale these, or actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the cursor back to selected. Sorry, yeah. Cursor to selected works in object mode as well, because the origin of the object's there. So, Shift Z, and we're just going to bring this back in. How does that look? That looks a bit funky. Yep, right. Just noticed that there. We're actually going to do it to these ones exclusively at the moment. Shift Z, we're going to bring this in to a bit there. And then we are going to do these individually. Just here. So we're going to select that there. Select that as the active object, the active element. And then we can scale it in. to about there. And you can do this with precise numbers, but this is, again, one of the details you're not really going to be needing precision on, so you can waste time on it, but there's like, why? So I'm going to put this in the middle. I'm going to put this in the middle as well. There we go. So now what we can actually do really quickly is we can... Actually, no, we're not going to do that. I was going to fill in the face at the bottom there, but I'm just thinking we have this sort of curve to worry about. So I'm actually going to start hiding the kind of exterior faces just so this becomes a bit easier to see. So we're going to hide all these. This. So we can only really see this kind of inset cut here, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have this sort of fillet here, but it goes all the way down and it kind of merges at the bottom here. It looks quite odd. It looks like it's going to be a bit difficult to model, and it will be difficult to model. Right, so how are we going to do this? I think what we're going to do is we're going to use a sort of almost Boolean approach. So actually I'm going to take this whole section and just make it a completely separate object just so we can see what we're doing a lot easier. Just for now. But we're going to, once you select everything, if you just, so if you select the faces you want, and you just do right click, separate selection, back to edit mode, and shift H to get rid of it all. We're also going to hide the array modifier for now, just so we're only working with one. Right, so if we get the CAD model back up, you can see the fillet is essentially, quite conveniently, from here to about there. So it shouldn't be too hard to sort out. What I'm going to do, let's have a look how we're going to approach this. I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make this on one side for now. So we're going to essentially cut this in half. So we're going to delete that bit there. And then we are going to create another cut here for now, and then use that. So I'm actually going to get rid of, actually no. So right, okay, we're going to get rid of this half. You can see me kind of working through this in real time. This is the kind of whole point of this series. It's just so you can get an idea of my thought process and just kind of how I would approach a problem like this. Because I feel like there's a lot of that kind of thing on YouTube of like, or especially with Blender tutorials, there's a lot on if you want to learn how to make something by copying exactly step by step, and unless there's plenty of that, like go watch YouTubers that are far better than me, like Ryan King Art and that kind of thing. They're a lot better. Blender Guru, all those kind of people. But if you want kind of more thought process videos of how you would approach certain problems, that's what I'm trying to do here. So hopefully this is interesting to a lot of you, or at least somewhat helpful. Right, my plan here, I'm going to take this and just make this another separate object so I can work with it a bit easier. I'm going to make a nice little cut in here at about the same angle. And also if you hit delete on the numpad, it'll zoom into whatever you've got selected. I'll center it. So that looks about good. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, Control Shift B, like we did in the last video. And then you can scroll up to increase the number of subdivisions there. I'm actually going to do it until it stops about there. Then we can take this, we can dissolve that vertex there, so it's just one vertex, and we can actually dissolve that one, but we don't need that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to extrude this. Actually, no, not yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these here, back into this mode, get rid of these pretty much completely, right? I'm going to join these back together so they're the same object. I'm going to get rid of this vertex for now, and what we're going to do here, I'm going to go to the bottom here, I'm going to fill this into, get rid of that vertex for now, and then just start to kind of connect these up. And then what we're going to do, we are going to go into auto merge vertices, we're going to turn that on, and we're going to do split edges and faces. We're going to set the threshold really low, I think, so like 0.01 millimeters, something insanely low like that, just so that it's very precise. And what we're going to do here is we're going to extrude this face down, and it's going to cut into the bottom face, so hopefully it'll give us the geometry we're looking for, and then we can clean up the topology later, or just kind of after it. So we're going to do extrude all the way down, left click, and let's see, has this done what I would like it to do? Sort of. Almost. Not really. Okay, it's sort of done it. It's starting to get there. It's cut away this sort of thing. What we're actually going to do then, how would we work through this? I'm going to just delete that face. I'm going to connect these two up because this is sort of what we're looking for. We're getting there, right? And you can see the normals are now all over the place. So what we're going to do, we're going to go mesh, normals, recalculate outside. Hopefully, okay, it's got some of them. I think because the faces have been joined in a really weird way, it doesn't quite understand which direction I want the normals to be in. So we have to put that back. Yep. And I'm going to get these. I'm going to get this face and get rid of it. This face we can also get rid of for now, and then these faces we just want to flip them. And there's no face there for now. Cool. So we're going to take this, get rid of that there, or sorry, get rid of that vertex there. And this is the kind of process of elimination here. We're just trying to get rid of the geometry we don't want. So we can connect that back up. I don't know where the hell these faces decided to flip on me. Flip these back. There we go. So let's have a look at this. We're going to take these vertices back up. I'm actually going to turn off split edges and faces for now, just in case we get any vertices too close and it starts to do any weird connections we don't want. So I'm going to connect these up. You can see we've got this cut in the right place. Right, okay, so we want to move these vertices up so that they kind of align with the face there. So we're going to go with this side view here. Just for reason, this is kind of here, right? So we want to try and keep these in a sort of straight line. I think what I might do is I might extrude this and then scale it relative to this. Yeah, that'll be good. So we can use this kind of as a reference point. So if we scale that so it's aligned with there. Is that doing what I want it to? Not quite, okay. I think it's more. Right, okay. Right. I'm going to hook these up quickly. I want to hook this up this way. Not really, I don't think. Right, let's get the actual CAD back up and let's have a look. So we want this geo here, this geometry here to be pulled back in. So we're going to scale this to the 3D cursor. Next Shift Z and then hold Shift to make it a smaller kind of change. Pull that to about there. That's kind of what we want. So I think what we can do now, we can actually extrude this and then we're going to rotate it around the Z axis, right? So we're going to RZ. And I'm actually going to turn auto merge vertices on real quick. And you can see it kind of merges there. Right, great. Okay, we're getting somewhere. So now what we have here at the bottom is you could very easily just kind of connect this back up. I was going to say it's a triangle, but there's not a triangle. Good, it's a quad. So we can actually just connect this back up. I'm actually going to turn off. I'm going to merge these two. Center. So it's now a quad. I'm going to turn off our modifiers as well for now. We're going to make these ones kind of bevel weighted like that. I am going to. I think I might have to make an extra cut here maybe. Because you see, this is now an angle on this thing here. This now has 5 vertices, even though it looks like a quad. So we've got the 2 at the top. But if we're going at the bottom, we've got 1, 2, 3 at the bottom. So I think what might be a good idea, just for the sake of geometry, is to bring that in there. Merge these two. So it's now back to a quad. Right. So now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut in the back face here. Bring that down to there. Apologies, but again, we're talking for ages. So we're going to bring this down here as well, so that we now have a sort of clean quad-based geometry up here. And then we can add a bevel weight here to make that sharp. And you can see now, oh, not there yet. We connect these faces up, that's all good. Now we do have a sort of triangle thing going on here. We actually have two vertices on the same spot in this location. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to select everything, make sure invert it select mode, merge vertices by distance, and make sure it's like 0.01 millimeters. So it's quite short. So we've removed one. There we go. So now vertices that are on the exact same spot will be merged. We can add that there. And now I think to try and, I don't think I would maintain quads. I want to try and make it so that if I was to make a cut here, it would loop round to there, right? So I think the best way to do that for now is to literally just make a cut like that. So 0. And just, if there's any dodgy geometry, it'll or any dodgy kind of tool paths, it'll be confined into this hole, essentially. So instead of, if I wanted to make a cut and it went in here, it would go all the way back and up and all that. If I make a cut in here, it's predictable and it kind of mirrors across. But the only kind of screwed up, if there's any screwed up geometry, it's confined to the one place and it kind of doesn't affect the rest of the model. So, we've got a triangle here. I think, to be honest, how would we solve this? This is a bit of a weird place to have a triangle. It's kind of one of those places where we would eventually have a triangle. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut here. Make that shift Z. And maybe bring that back to about there or something. Just so this is a quad. So you can see, it does look a bit weird, but now this whole thing is a quad. You can see if I bring this up, you can sort of see where the path would go. I'm actually going to bring this whole thing up as well. Put there. Over there. Cool. So let's have a look at this. So if I wanted to make a cut here, it would go all the way around. That's good. Same with this. It's a bit weird here, but that's fine because it'll kind of be mirrored and it'll go back around itself. That's actually probably quite good. And then again with the same with this, it would go all the way to the bottom and back up, and then the same sort of thing around here. Good. So if we were to make a cut, if we were to make a loop cut, it would kind of do what we want it to. It would be in a kind of expected area. Or an expected path, rather. So, now we've kind of cleaned up all this, what we're going to do is we are going to do that. We're going to mirror it around the 3D cursor, so SX -1, and when you -1, the normals flip, so you enable mesh, normals flip, and then make sure we're around the 3D cursor, we're just going to rotate this by 45 degrees, select everything, merge by distance, and we have cleaned up all the vertices, and then we can shade smooth, and we can put our modifiers back on, and you can see here once we get the boat tail back up, it's pretty much the same geometry. The actual positions are maybe slightly off. We might want to kind of pull or push things back and forward a bit, but for me that is good enough, I would say. So I'm going to hide this version of the CAD for now. We're going to get this back here. We're going to turn off these modifiers for a second, and we're going to shade that flat. So now our goal is to, I'm actually going to go back into this. We're going to Alt H, just so we can unhide everything. We're going to try and connect this back up to here. So I think what we're going to do, first off, we're just going to join it back up. Not merge any vertices yet, but we're going to get rid of these two faces here. Right, okay. So now I think we can safely sort of merge these vertices, right? It's just as long as these still line up. Let me double check. No, we can't. So what we need to do now is we need to make a cut here. And you can see this is why we maintain good topology, because if we want to make a cut here, it does what we expect it to do. It'll kind of loop back around and it'll make this extra cut here for us. Whereas if you had screwed up topology, it would go around in some other loop and maybe create like a vertex here. And now you need to add more vertices into the base structure and it screws up all the symmetry and all that. So that's why you want to think about your topology, right? So now we can, I'm going to merge these ones manually just because I'm not sure if they'll be in our precision. So merge vertices by distance, and then we can, or actually no. Vertices by distance, we're actually going to pull this back. There. And now we can merge vertices by distance for everything. So now this is all kind of connected back together. So if I was to make a cut, say here, you can see it goes back round into the same loop like that, and that's why we maintained good topology at the bottom here. or at least kind of coherent topology. It's still complicated to look at, it's still very, very complicated. I'm not going to pretend it's not, right? But it's at least coherent. So just quickly, I'm going to go to the bottom here and I'm going to shade this flat, and I'm just going to have a look and see if there's any edge bevel weights that we missed that we want to add. I don't think so. I think every edge that we wanted to make smooth is, or every edge we wanted to make sharp is quite sharp. So we're going to take that back up. Or, no, don't shade all of them. No, sorry, we're going to shade flat. Auto smooth essentially adds a modifier where it'll mark things as sharp depending on what angle they are to the next faces. We're going to get rid of that. We're just doing our sharpness manually through the subdivision surface kind of workflow. So the last thing we have to do is hook up this area again. So it starts off relatively easy. We can just take, say, this, kind of, or actually no, we can take this and we can rotate it like that, just there. So we're going to come on, I'm going to connect that back up if I can select it. There we go. And we might have to do the same thing over there. So actually, I'll model on this side and then I'll just do the same trick to flip it back to the other side. So I'm actually just going to get rid of all of the geometry there for a second. So we're just going to delete all of this crap while we're not using it. I'm going to go into wireframe and do this so you can delete things all the way through. Right. There we go. There we go. There, okay, so we now have this sort of 45-degree segment. We're going to hide the array as well. So, how would we connect this up? Let's have a look. I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these back a little bit so we have a bit more space to work with. And we could, it's definitely possible, we could just kind of put cuts all the way through here, right? The problem with that, I'm thinking, is we have to somehow, we would end up, if we just kind of extrude it out like, say, that, right? We would have two edges here and one edge here, and then we'd have to do some kind of weird things. So, what I'm thinking we might do, let's have a look at this. I think we're gonna have to start with that kind of general idea. So we're gonna put a bit here, and then maybe, let's think, if we connected these up, that might not be great. Yeah, because if we wanted to make a cut here, this is where this topology starts to get complicated. So if we wanted to make a cut on, actually I'm going to hide the modifiers. If we wanted to make a cut on this face, it would go all the way down, but it would come back up and kind of around, and it's meant to come back up and around, but I would prefer it to come back up and around just here instead of going all the way off to the side here. So what we want to do, actually we want to get rid of this. And we want to connect this to here, right? So that means, see, it now just loops through the whole thing, right? So the next face, the next thing we want to do is we want to maintain the path of this and this being connected in some way. So we're going to hook that up for now. What we can then do, push that kind of in there, let's see. And if we were to make a cut here, you can see that goes round to the side here. So if you can imagine, if it's back and it's kind of a raid form and it's getting back in the circle, this is going to go around the circle anyway. So we don't want it to push it back over here, right? We want to have two types of kind of edge loops. We want to have edge loops that go around like that, and we want to have edge loops that go around like that. And we don't want them to kind of intermingle. So we want to have, I'd say, this like that for now is probably the easiest, right? And then we already have a quad here, we can't just merge it, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea at the moment. That kind of goes around here. So if we were to merge it, then we would, yeah, so if we were to say, just make this a quad, then the loop cut would go around here, and then it would kind of do that, which I guess isn't too bad, but it's still a bit weird. I'd rather it go all the way around instead of being able to individually affecting one there, right? So it's probably, going to be a case of this, right? Now we have a triangle. So what we can do, that goes to the bottom. So what we can do, let's have a look at this. We can maybe have it kind of an extra vertex in there, perhaps. Like that. So now, yeah, so it goes through there. Right. Yeah, just like that. So I think that's probably quite good. I'm going to just do some cleanup just to make everything. You're trying to get everything to be about the same size of face, right? Just that's about what you're looking for. Right, so now you can see we're going to kind of test all these kind of edges in this different edge loop here, right? So this cut here, this is the kind of harder to find one. This just loops around on the kind of edge of this back face here, right? But all of these ones that go around the outside, they just go kind of around this sort of profile here, this, and they don't go round to the edge or anything like that. And then we have all these ones. These all just cut through and up and around and back to where they start. This is the one that goes around the kind of circumference of this flat plate here, or this flat section here. This is the same, this goes in and down and around and back up. It just goes around, it doesn't cut over these. This is the same as that one, it's the same as that one. Cool. And now, all we need to do, same check we've done before. Media cursor, so we're going to duplicate it with Shift D and then right click, and then SX-1, mesh, normals, flip. Then we're going to merge vertices by distance. We're just going to do it in this way right now so you can actually see everything. And now we can array everything together. There we go. And so now you can keep it like this, but if you want to if you were to export it or something like that, you would just apply that array and essentially you can see everything's automatically merged up like that. So there we go. So now you can see if we go to make a loop cut around each edge here, it stays within each edge. It doesn't go down and it doesn't start making cuts like here. So sometimes you could have, say if you had kind of worse topology, like say you connected these up or something like that. If you wanted to make a cut here, you see how bad that is. You want to make the cut just on this little edge here, and it goes all the way around and starts adding extra cuts in here, right? So you're trying to keep your loop cuts clean and separated from each other. And yeah, there we go. I would say that is a pretty done model. So now you can see if we go into the kind of render view. Obviously this is viewport render, so it's a bit kind of blurry and a bit noisy, but you can apply, let's just give it I know it's meant to be 3D printed, but say if it was 3D printed, it would be quite high roughness, maybe a darker color. Let's give it, maybe make it like kind of red, just to show you what you would get. Let's make it a bit darker. I'm just kind of screwing away with the colors now, just to show off what this might look like in real life. You would get a bit of transmission, maybe not that much, but yeah, look at that. That's quite cool, right? So that would be a kind of like resin, and then you could turn the transmission down a little bit, or turn it up just a tiny bit, just so you get that kind of slight, have the light come through, especially at these thinner parts of the plastic. You could see the light comes through the little holes and comes back, it comes right through like that. Yeah, so hopefully you found this quite helpful. Hopefully, I don't know, God, how long I've been recording. This is nearly an hour. So hopefully, if you're still here, first of all, thank you very much for watching all the way at the end. If this kind of thing helps you, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I'd really recommend you check out Blender for Engineers, which is my course in the top link in the description. So this is a kind of similar workflow to one of the things we go through in that course. What we essentially do as part of that is we take an existing CAD model, just like the one in that, it's a bit more complicated than that one, and we go through a bunch of different topology tips and how to retopologize it. There's also stuff on creating concept renders from, say, just pure technical documents. So the example we go through is we take an aircraft type spec document and we build out a concept model for it, which is kind of fully dimensioned but is fully made in Blender, so we can animate it, we can make all these nice fancy renders of it. And it's really good, like I said, if you're, say, like an engineering startup and you're trying to avoid hiring a big fat media team or branding and that kind of thing, if you learn this kind of skill yourself, it can really just take your kind of presentations and pitches to the next level if you're looking for like funding and that kind of thing, right? Because how do I say, I'm going to try and find this example. I think it was a European paper on like hydrogen. What was it? It was Yeah, so I can't remember, was it this? Yeah, like this sort of thing looks quite good, but there was a paper on this specific kind of project that I saw that just had some really crap, like pretty much Microsoft Paint drawings. Whereas something like this is a completely fictional aircraft that's not been built, and if you can present this very realistic looking 3D model to say investors, something like something like this, right? This is the kind of stuff you can do within Blender, which you can imagine just you can't really do this with a CAD package. Like, yeah, you can take the original CAD model, but you couldn't really do something this advanced with all the scenery and all of that and show something actually in action, essentially. So yeah, hopefully this video was useful, and like I said, if you're interested, course links in the description. I'd also recommend if you just comment on the videos if this kind of thing, or sorry, if this kind of thing helps you. If there's anything that you would like me to cover in the future, that would be greatly appreciated. So thanks for watching.